Hi again, Mark here from TalkingBass.net. This week I'm going to be giving you a quick practice tip on how to practice scales or pretty much anything while really putting your technique under the musical microscope. If you've not visited TalkingBass.net, then go check it out. There's an ordered lesson map containing loads more HD video lessons, and there's also a section full of articles written by myself on all aspects of bass playing. And also remember to subscribe to Talking Bass to receive your free scale reference manual that's full of loads of scale patterns for you to practice to your heart's content. Okay, so let's have a look at a very simple C major scale pattern, starting here at the 8th fret of the E string, and we're going to be starting with the second finger. So that pattern is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, so most of you will know that as that basic C major pattern. And when people practice scales, they generally practice them like that. Up and down. But there's quite a few different ways that we can practice scales. For a start, we can practice them in sequences. Okay, so that was going up in fours. We can practice intervals through them. Or we can practice different arpeggios within them, etc. So there's loads of different ways that we can practice scales. But the way that I'm going to show you this time is going to be very, very simple, or what seems very simple. And I've been giving it to quite a few students recently, and it's actually been a lot tougher than it first seems. So what we're going to do is we're going to work through that C major scale one note at a time. Okay, we're not going to just run up and down it. We're going to work through it one note at a time, and we're going to really, really take apart our playing. So let's start with just the first two notes of the scale. So that's going to be C and D. Really, really easy. So because we've got such an easy pattern here, we can really take apart the technique. So first of all, let's have a look at the fretting hand. So we're going to be starting on the second finger, and then we're going to be playing with the fourth finger for the D. Now, one of the problems that we can have with using the fourth finger is that because, as you can see, the second finger here is so much longer than the fourth finger. If I put my hand there, you can see how much further down here this fourth finger is. It can be problematic when you're playing something like that and you want to go from the second finger to the fourth finger, and that's where a lot of this kind of moving around of the hand happens. So what we really want to do is have the hand in position ready to just put the fourth finger down. We don't want to be moving around to get the fourth finger there. So to do that, we need to pivot the hand. We don't want it like this. We don't want the fourth finger down here on this edge of the neck. We want it to be up here at the E string. So if you pivot the hand round, you should be able to get the fourth finger so that it's there level with the second finger, and also curve the fingers slightly. When you curve the fingers, they tend to line up a little bit better anyway. When they're flat out there, you can see how much longer that second finger is than the fourth finger. As I curl them, they even out. So you don't need to curl them too much, just enough to get this nice level plane here. So that's that hand for now. Picking wise, finger picking, we're going to start with the first finger. Now, don't worry, some of you might be starting with the second finger. Start with the first finger, and we are actually going to change round later on, as you'll see. But we're going to start with the first finger, and then we're going to alternate every single note. So we're using alternate picking. So it's going to be 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, etc. If we started on the second finger, we'd have 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And I want you to keep nice and relaxed in the hand. We don't want any tension or stress in the hands. And that goes for both hands. So we start there. We've got the first finger, then second finger, and the thumb I've got on the pickup. So I've also got a ramp there, so I can put it on the ramp too. But what we're going to try and do as we move across the strings here is that I'm going to try and keep the thumb on the next adjacent string to which one that we're playing. So at the moment we're on the E string, so I've got the thumb on the pickup. When we move to the A string, I'm going to move the thumb onto the E string. If I'm playing on the D string, I'm going to be putting the thumb there on the A string. So it gives us a little bit of exercise there, moving from string to string, okay, at speed. So that's the technical side of this out of the way. So there's the C to D. And when you play this, I want you to make sure that both notes ring out nice and clean. You don't want any scuffing at all, and both of them want to be roughly around the same dynamic, so the same volume. you'll probably find that that fourth finger is a little bit weaker than the second finger, or possibly a lot weaker. So you might have to push down a lot harder. And one thing to look out for when you're pushing down hard is you don't want to be bending the string. And that often happens when people push down hard, they bend the string out of tune. So we want to try and just place it down there, and you want to try and keep this string nice and straight. If you see any movement, just pay attention to it and try to stop doing it. I mean, with a lot of technical problems, that's pretty much all you need to do. You just see that you've done it and then try and stop doing it. Just pay attention to it more. And that just that side of paying attention is often enough, because as you do it, you can think, oh dear, bring it back down and just try to iron that out. Okay, so that's the technical side of this exercise. So now let's add the next note, the E. So, okay, so we don't need to play it round and round at all. We're just playing up C, D, E, and then hold on that E or stop. So when we do this, we're wanting to move the thumb over onto the E string there. And the important side of this, and this will be the same as we go up and down the scale, is that I want you to pay attention to which note we finish on. You don't really need to be paying attention to every single note as we work up, because as we get right up here and back down, thinking 1 2 1 2 1 2 with the alternate picking could become a little bit stressful. So just pay attention to the note that you're finishing on, because it should be a certain note. So C to D, we finished on the second finger. When we get to the E, we want to be on the first finger. And each time, obviously, it's going to alternate. So C, D, E, F, that would be finishing on the second finger. When we get to the G, we should be finishing on the first finger. And we just pay attention to that as we move up and down. So again, C, D, E. Start off playing it slow. Nice clean notes there, and a nice easy movement of the thumb onto the E string. So like I say, we're putting everything under the musical microscope here. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't really need to do this. I can play a C major scale already. But the principles that I'm putting into effect here are going to be applied to other things later on. Okay, so we're going to get onto how to practice much more difficult things, pieces and lines, etc. So C, D, E, C, D, E, C, D, E. Now, as you can imagine, we're going to add the F. So C, D, E, F. So the thumb is still there on the E string. And as you do this, try to keep the hand movement in the picking hand as minimal as possible. You don't want to be bringing the fingers up and down like this. Try and keep that fourth finger in place. You don't really need to concentrate as much on this hand, because this is the one that's going to be moving down slightly, but the fourth finger will be the guide. So keep that fourth finger over that 10th fret there as we move up. So if I was to play the major scale up and down, notice how that fourth finger always stays there. I'm not bringing it down here at all. That's the guide. And try and keep that fourth finger parallel with the frets, okay? And as I've said, when you get to the F, you should be finishing on the second finger. So now let's try just working through each one in turn up to the octave. So next one, we play up to the G, and we'll be finishing on the first finger. Now up to the A. There I'm finishing on the second finger of the picking hand. And when you play these fragments, you can then build up speed with them, play them in isolation. It's not necessarily a linear pattern where we're going to be playing. We're not playing it as an exercise like that. These are fragments that can be taken away and played in isolation. Okay, so you can build up speed on an individual fragment. So now let's add the B. And we're going to be playing that B with the first finger, the picking hand that is. And you can move the thumb across onto the A string as the anchor point. And then we add the C, which is going to be with the second finger. If you have any problems with any of the crossing the strings, just slow the exercise right down. It can actually seem harder playing it slow than it can playing it fast, which is strange, but... Okay. And then you can build up speed. So now let's start descending back down through the scale, and this is where a lot of the problems can occur for people getting finger twisted. And a lot of this is to do with getting mixed up with the alternate picking and raking, because as people start coming down, they tend to start raking. And there's nothing wrong with raking, it's just that for this exercise we want to really stick rigidly to the alternate picking, because when you're playing something like, you know, a piece or something tough, usually, it really helps to be able to use alternate picking if you have to. You don't want to be confined by your own technical limitations or habits. You know, habits can creep in, like raking, and sometimes there might be something where you just get finger twisted when you try raking, and you know, if you try raking without thinking about it, you know, just as a habit, a certain part later on might cause problems for you. So in those instances, you really need to concentrate on the alternate picking. You know, the habit is getting in the way. So this is a good way of practicing that sticking rigidly to a system like alternate picking, okay? So we're going to go up the scale and back down to the B, okay? So when we get back down to the B, we should be on the first finger. The reason I keep giving you this update after every single note is because sometimes you will land on the wrong finger, and that's when you know that you've gone wrong. And sometimes it's hard to know where you've gone wrong, and you have to just work back through the fragments to find out where the problem you know, lay. So that's what this exercise is good for. It's good as a troubleshooting system, so that if you're trying to play something quite difficult, go back through it note by note, note by note, and then, you know, analyze which finger you should be landing on. And, you know, often in a piece, especially when you play things like classical pieces that are quite fast, or, you know, just particular lines in a song, you'll find that you can't really keep track of the finger picking. But if you've got little waypoints where you know that, yes, that note should be a first finger or that note should be a second finger, you can then, as you get to those waypoints, think, right, that one was off, and then work back and try and find out where the problem is, okay? And that's where these fragments come in. So now let's go back down to the A. So we're landing on the second finger there. Okay, now let's move down to the G. And when we get to the G, we should be on the first finger. And it's also worth bearing in mind that, as I mentioned, these waypoints that you can check for, it's usually after crossing strings, because that's where the raking is going to happen if you're going to habitually do it. So there we need to be on the first finger. Now down to the F. Okay, second finger there for the F. Now the E. First finger for the E. And now this is the one that always seems to cause problems for people. We come back down to the D. So that should be the second finger when you come back. And the second finger is often quite difficult. Well, it's quite difficult to use the second finger to come back down a string. And that's where people feel like they want to do the rake with the first finger. So really pay attention to coming back onto that D on the second finger. You might have to move your hand, slightly to come back. And now finally back to the C, which should be back on the first finger. So that was the scale working up and down starting on the first finger. So now let's try playing it starting on the second finger. And the reason that I'm going to try both ways, and the reason that I'm talking about sticking to this rigid alternating picking system, is because you don't always have the luxury of having a choice of what finger you're going to be on when you're moving across strings. And most of the time it's probably going to be all right, and you know, most of the time you're going to be able to get by with certain raking things and stuff like that without even thinking about it, you know, just habitually getting by or instinctively getting by. But sometimes you can run into a problem, you know, some kind of technical problem where you're getting finger twisted and you just can't figure out how to get around it. And often it's to do with the finger picking and getting finger twisted in this hand, and you know, something just might not feel natural. And this kind of exercise helps to get used to these particular movements, you know, coming back on a second finger, moving across on first finger, you know, different ways of moving across strings. And, you know, so it's a really good exercise for that, so that you're prepared then. So yeah, we'll start working across starting on the second finger. So C, D there, so we've got 2, 1. Now I'll move up to the E, and obviously this time I'm crossing straight over with the second finger. So E's played with the second finger of the picking hand, F with the first finger, to the G, which is with the second finger, A with the first finger, B, B with the second finger, and the C octave is played with the first finger. So if you get to that C and you're not on the first finger, you know that there's a problem somewhere there. So work your way back through those through the fragments and figure out where the problem lies. And as I've said before, over and over again, it'll probably be to do with the string crossing. So now let's start working down again. So up to the C and back to the B. So the B's played with the second finger, A there with the first finger. G, second finger. And that's where a lot of people will find problems, because you want to rake there from the A back to the G with the first finger. Down to the F with the first finger, E, second finger, and the D. Whoops, see, I'm making the mistake there. So the D's with the first finger. And finally back down to the C, finishing on the second finger. Okay, so that's the C major scale, but as I've mentioned before, you can apply this concept to any scale that you play, and beyond that, any line that you play. And this is particularly useful when learning really tricky pieces. For instance, I've recently been practicing a piece by Frank Zappa called St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast, and I like learning lines like this, you know, that aren't written for bass, keyboard lines, guitar lines, sax lines, etc. And the instrumental section of this piece is really, really tough. And it was actually used by Frank as an audition piece for new bass players. So I know it's not totally impossible, but it's just very, very hard. Now, it moves all over the place using some really big jumps of intervals, so your finger picking gets really stretched. And this method of breaking down a line into these smaller fragments can really, really help. So the opening of the line sounds like this. Okay, so I'm not going to keep going through it, but that's... You can hear there it's moving around a lot with the intervals. Okay, so when I'm playing something like this, it helps to break it down into smaller chunks like we have done with the scale. So if I play... I've added a note there. Okay, so you can see how that works. Just break it down, play through one note at a time. I mean, I started from maybe 3 or 4 notes in there, but you know, when you have a problem, maybe the first few notes aren't too difficult for you. As soon as you start finding problems, just break it down and work on them in isolation. And you can even build up speed. And you know, just to see whether it's actually possible with that fingering, because some fingerings for particular pieces are not as conducive to playing them really fast. Sometimes the most let's say natural fingering for you to that you might find for a certain thing maybe isn't the best way to play it at speed. There might be another fingering that you can find that just works better, or that might feel just better for you, because you know, different strokes for different folks. But okay, so that's probably about as tricky as a line as you're going to get, and you can just break it down into smaller fragments. So hopefully that technique practice tip's going to help with learning new material and possibly add a new dimension to the way that you practice in general. So subscribe to this channel for updates on new videos each week, and like or comment if it's been helpful. Also visit talkingbass.net for more lessons and articles, and subscribe to receive the free scale reference guide. And I sometimes give out other free goodies as well from time to time. If you check out the Talking Bass store, there's books and backing tracks for sale to help you with practice, and I also give Skype bass lessons. So if you want any more personalised tuition, just get in touch. Okay, see you later.